Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Director Ash, it's good to see you again. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you,
It was
sir.
a pleasure finding out that we actually grew up within a few miles of each other.
Right.
And so you will appreciate my concern that the bat seems to be endangered with the Atlanta Braves these days, and anything you can do to recover that would be greatly appreciated.
Being a Nationals fan, now I have to, go with the home team.
Well, let's go continuing down these lines of the recovery plans. They obviously have decreased, and yet they're important to getting certain species off and removed from the endangered list. Just from another perspective of trying to wrap my mind around it, why have the number of recovery plans decreased when they are vital to removing some of the species who perhaps are not endangered any longer?
I don't believe the number of recovery plans have decreased. Of the 1,600 plus species that are listed under the law, I believe we have recovery plans for nearly 1,300. And of the species that have been listed more than 3 years, it takes time to develop a recovery plan. Of the species that have been listed more than 3 years, 85% of those species have recovery plans. So I think we've been making good progress in building recovery plans, but it is a lengthy process as well.
Well, the information that we've had is recovery plans have decreased from 843 in the 90s to 177 today. Are you saying that's not accurate?
Oh, no, we have far more than 177 recovery plans.
Okay, I would like to, if you could provide that information.
I will do
to
that.
committee, I would appreciate that. So then you're saying that the recovery plans have not decreased, and therefore there is no problem with the ability of FWS to recover and delist species?
No, well, the recovery is a challenging endeavor, as we've talked about in a number of respects. Recovery can be a very difficult, very challenging, long-term endeavor. It is a long-term endeavor. I would say an example that.
But the recovery plan is not interfering with the ability to delist species that need to be delisted.
I would say the availability of a recovery plan can be a limitation like in the case we were just talking about with the Mexican wolf. I think a revised recovery plan can help us in building a pathway to long-term recovery for the wolf, and that's why we're working on it. So in some cases it can be a necessary step that we need to take, and it can be a limiting factor. But in most cases where we have recovery plans, we're working.
Well, how come we're not seeing species delisted?
I think the majority of species that are listed and a strong majority of the species for which we have recovery plans are stable or increasing. And so I think across the board we are making progress toward recovery.
It seems to me that we have a lot more species getting on the list than we have species that deserve it getting off the list.
Well, I think the species that deserve it, again, in this administration, as I said, we've targeted investments to species that are near the end of that process of recovery, and we're getting them off the list. And I think we're getting better at recovery. We're building durable partnerships to achieve that long-term success. And I think the record that I'm talking about for this administration will be a short-lived record, because I think we're beginning to see the effects of several decades of work on recovery, and we're showing that targeted investments can get species over that final hump. And so I think the record that I'm talking about, and I'm proud of, I think it'll actually be a pretty short-lived record.
I think you're making this very difficult for me to wrap my mind around, because it does not appear to me that species are getting off the list. It's an enormous battle to get species off the list that deserve to be off the list, while more and more are getting on the list, and it all obviously creates problems. Let me go back to a question, because I've only got about 30 seconds here. You said earlier that you have multiple meetings with local governments and different groups and all that sort of thing, and yet we heard testimony just yesterday as to how often the federal government tends to ignore, in your case, local governments, which is the truth. I mean, you may be meeting, but local government input is important And it appears as though that really is not taking place, although as your testimony, meetings are happening.
Well, again, not to be argumentative, but I think that input is happening. And earlier this year, we lived through the occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. And if you were listening to that debate, you heard the people in Burns saying that, they were solving their problems their way because the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is working with them and has worked with them for a decade on a comprehensive conservation plan for the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge.
So was the testimony yesterday accurate or inaccurate?
If I'm hearing it correctly, I believe it's largely inaccurate. I think that Harney County, Oregon, where the Malheur Refuge exists, we have a candidate conservation agreement with assurances, and during the Malheur occupation, John O'Keefe, the head of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association, was saying, we're working our problems out with the federal government, and we're working through the candidate conservation agreement process. We have come to an agreement, and so we're working at the county level, at the municipal level, which not to say that we're perfect or infallible, but I think we are demonstrating that we can and do work well at the local level. We can do more if we have more people in the field to do that kind of work.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.